When I was a kid, I loved going to BrainPop Jr. Ever since in my elementary school days, I would always love visiting that website a lot. I even got a kick out of Moby and his silly little antics at the end of each and every BrainPop Jr. movie, with Annie, a young girl, who is friends with the robot, who also appeared in BrainPop with Tim. Moby was always my favorite character, but I also like Annie as well in BrainPop Jr. The website was always my favorite website to go to ever since when I was little, in my elementary school days when our teachers let us have free time on the computer after we were done with our work. The story, though, might change, and you would never want to visit that ugly-looking BrainPop Jr. video ever again. One day, when I was on my computer, I decided to check out what's new with BrainPop Jr. So I went to BrainPop, and before I went to BrainPop Jr., I decided to log in with my school account, which I will not give you, obviously, so I decided to sign in anyway. And when I got to the entire BrainPop Jr. website, everything was all normal on the BrainPop Jr. website until something caught my eye. There was this new BrainPop Jr. movie that Annie and Moby were discussing in the movie of the day or week or whatever it's called, something, and I decided to check it out. And when it said movie of the week, Annie and Moby were doing a BrainPop Jr. video about schizophrenia. It was called Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia? What? Why would Annie and Moby discuss about schizophrenia? Don't you know that schizophrenia is bad? They should never mention what it is. It sounds more like a BrainPop movie to me, with Tim discussing what schizophrenia is with Moby. I decided to watch the video anyway, so I clicked on the video. As I clicked on the video, the intro started, as it should, but when it got to the chalkboard part, with Moby writing the topic in each and every BrainPop Jr. movie, with Annie writing with Annie and Moby, but Annie was nowhere to be seen. Just Moby writing, usually normal, with the white chalk in his hand writing the words schizophrenia. As soon as he was done writing it, it was called Schizophrenia with Annie and Moby. The video started out with Moby looking all sad. Well, extreme sad and depressed. I felt really bad for him. He didn't say anything, but instead just puts his head down on the table. Annie then walks over to Moby and says, "Moby, what's the matter? What's wrong? Why are you sad?" Moby then responded with only a few beeps, which he didn't want to talk about because he was so sad and down in the dumps because he didn't want to mention it ever again. Annie then says, "There's something we could cheer you up. Don't feel sad, Moby. There's something to cheer ourselves up to." But as Annie said this, Moby starts to go crazy. His head was spinning around like the Exorcist, and his head was also shaking violently. At first I thought his head was going to explode, but it turns out, after he was rattling and shaking his head, he starts to have that evil smile on his face, which also a mad expression. He gone mad. Moby had an evil expression on his face and a mad look combined. He looked menacingly like he was scheming or something, and had an evil smile on his face. Annie then realized what Moby has got. He had schizophrenia. Then Annie stares at the camera and says, "What is schizophrenia?" while we see Annie's notebook that reads, "What is schizophrenia?" Annie then discusses what schizophrenia is, and of course we all know what it is. Its treatment is usually lifelong and often involves a combination of medication, psychotherapy, and coordinated specialty care services. While Annie discusses what schizophrenia is, we see Moby going into huge rage and starts going bananas like if he was having a huge meltdown or something, as we see him destroying stuff. And of course, he even threw the couch from Annie's classroom out into the window with a loud window smash sound. I cringed. I covered my ears because it sounded like actual glass, like an actual object hitting the window, like a brick or something. We also see Moby destroying other stuff, especially the school fishes and the hamster, which the school fishes we all know from the Belly Up comics on BrainPop Jr. He starts destroying everything, especially the hamster cage. We also see him destroying books while Annie discusses what schizophrenia is, which I shall write this down. Annie was discussing each one of the symptoms of what you get from schizophrenia, as we see montages of Moby looking still sad, but also having an evil smirk on his face. Annie then says, you could have unusual or extremely slowed movements, like you're not actually moving that fast. Sometimes schizophrenia could make you have incoherent or disorganized speaking, like you're not talking right. We then see Moby seeing something like he was in an acid trip or something, as his eyes were darting around in a black background. Annie then says, you can even have hallucinations, like you're related to hearing voices or strange sounds. We then see Moby going into a deep fit of rage as he was shaking his head with his hands, while Annie says, you can even have delusions, which is false beliefs that remain unchanged despite contradicting evidence. We then see Moby sitting on a gigantic cage, which almost kind of looked like a bird cage, while Annie says, you can also have isolating behavior or emotionless facial expressions or speech. Because of those symptoms, you may, while we see different photos of what would happen when you get schizophrenia, Annie then says, you could feel suspicious, paranoid, or afraid frequently, as we see a photo that isn't Annie or Moby, but just one of Annie's friends, which is Becca, looking like she's facing away from the camera or something. Then we see a picture of a soap while Annie says, you don't even care about hygiene and appearances. And then we see another character from BrainPop Jr., which is one of Annie's friends, that is, Tasha, while she says, you can sometimes have depression, anxiety, and think about suicide. And the worst part of all, we see a beer bottle, a pack of cigarettes, and pills, while Annie explains, you might end up with alcohol, nicotine, prescription medications, or recreational drugs to self-medicate symptoms. We then see a photo of Moby, like he sees someone entering the door, but turns out he was hallucinating, while Annie discusses what is hallucinations, and of course we already know what it is. And then we see Moby having delusions while Annie was still rambling on and on about schizophrenia. She even mentioned about disorganized thinking, which we see Moby coming up with too many thoughts in his head. And he even starts to shake violently. His entire body was shaking violently while Annie says, you can even have abnormal motor behavior, which it looks like Moby was having a seizure. As Annie was still keep on talking about schizophrenia, Moby then starts to have an evil smile again and pulls out a knife. I was scared. Why would Moby have a knife? He should never do that in a BrainPop Jr. video like this. I was terrified of seeing what Moby was holding, and that BrainPop was supposed to be appropriate for young children, not to have any violence or whatever, not to have disturbing things. As Annie was still keep on talking about what we all know about schizophrenia, Moby then starts to go on a killing spree. He then went to start killing one of Annie's family members. He first killed Grandpop, which we hear an old man screaming with blood splattering all across the screen, while Moby was still stabbing Annie's grandpa, Grandpop. He then went into Mia's room while we see Mia still doing that conversation thing on her phone while accompanied by a random sound of gibberish until we hear nothing but a girl screaming and that Moby was killing Mia, Annie's sister, by stabbing her to death with a knife as blood splattered all over the room. And Moby and Annie at one point says, when you get schizophrenia, you could even go psycho, and then you start to have this weird feeling that you want to kill everybody. This made me sick to my stomach as I saw Moby's face covered in blood. I felt an urge to vomit, but I wanted to continue what happens next. While Annie was still talking about schizophrenia, about what we should do, how to get rid of schizophrenia and all that, Moby just starts to kill everybody in Annie's school, especially one of Annie's friends, Becca and Tasha, especially the boys from that one BrainPop Jr. video about bullying. He starts stabbing one by one. The blood splattered in front of them, and Moby, as we also see the walls splattered in blood, especially the lockers. Moby wouldn't stop doing this, but I was so scared and horrified of what Moby has done. He gone psycho, and he was like a serial killer. After the end of the discussion of what schizophrenia is, Annie then hears a loud chainsaw noise, thinking it was Moby going to kill Annie with a chainsaw. I was freaked out until I hear Annie say, "Uh-oh, this can't be good," as we hear a little girl screaming, which sounded a lot like Annie, as Annie started running away from Moby with the chainsaw, as we see Moby chasing Annie with a chainsaw until the video went black and we hear a realistic sound of a girl screaming with blood splattered all over, blood splattering everywhere, while Moby was still killing her with a chainsaw. The video ended there with just nothing. I was so dumbfounded at what I had just saw, and I felt like I wanted to faint. I totally blacked out afterwards after what I saw in that disturbing BrainPop Jr. video. I mean, why the heck would BrainPop Jr. talk about schizophrenia? Who comes up with that idea? Am I being like in a dream or something, that what I had just saw of a disturbing video of Moby killing everybody in that disturbing BrainPop Jr. video? Am I even going nuts of what I had just saw? I didn't want to talk about what happened. So, after I blacked out, I decided to go back to my computer again and to make sure that the BrainPop Jr. schizophrenia video was disappeared off the entire website. And as soon as I refreshed the page, the schizophrenia video vanished, which I was glad I didn't want to see that video again until my computer froze at one point. I tried to restart my computer until I realized I got the BSOD again. I was so stupid of why did I watch that disturbing video of BrainPop Jr. Next time, I would never want to go to that website ever again, as long as I shall live. To this day, the world may never know whatever happened to that BrainPop Jr. video. I think I know why. Maybe it's probably because I could see why BrainPop is really hard to get into nowadays, because you can't find your school email account anymore, since BrainPop Jr. and BrainPop nowadays have changed the login options. But however, I was glad I didn't want to see that video again, and I warn you to never watch that horrifying BrainPop Jr. Whether they're talking about that is not schizophrenia, or if they do, please don't watch this video. Just turn off your computer or whatever. Just do as I do. Don't ever thinking about watching that video ever again.